Next, for those of you that were here in April, Billy, is this thing working?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. For those of you that were here in April, you know we had our scholarship dinner, and at that time this year, there was a scholarship named after our member, John Beatty, and I'm pleased to, first of all, the winner is here, Libby Watts. Libby, stand up, just wave your hand. Sit down, Libby. Sit down, Libby. I'm real happy that she works at WGLS, that she won the scholarship. Jan Beatty is here today, and Jan asked if she could say a few words, so I'd like to introduce her now. Jan?
Thank you so much. Libby begins her career at a college-owned radio station, the same as John did. His career began at WRUF in Gainesville, Florida, which was known as the Bastard radio station when it was licensed in 1929 by Garland Powell. The reason it was called the Bastard radio station is because it received both a commercial license and an educational license. John did Insomnia Serenade on Saturday nights with all the lush, beautiful big band music that he was still playing when he died a year ago. I called him one night on Insomnia Serenade to hear a hymn to a hymn from My Fair Lady, which was my favorite Broadway musical at the time, and a romance began that lasted for 47 years. I wish you the very best, Libby, in the field of broadcasting. It's very exciting. Wonderful, good friends will come your way. Enjoy your journey.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you so much. And don't forget, if you want to, this is my pitch, contribute to the scholarship program. Weber would love to take your money, and it does help out an awful lot of college kids. I am going to have a full board meeting in June. Board of Directors, you'll be getting a note in the mail. A couple of quick announcements. The committee met today and they finalized our Hall of Fame people for the November luncheon. And I thought that some of you might like to know who they selected. Ed Shockey, posthumously, makes a lot of sense. Diane Allen, Jane Norman, Georgie Woods, Les Wass, Bill Wright Sr., and Scott Palmer. So that's the list for this year. The committee did an outstanding job. Thank you. It was like the Vatican electing a pope. I tried to get Captain Noah to blow black smoke and white smoke every time we had a vote, and he kind of looked at me strangely. Speaking of Captain Noah, Carter and Pat today, I want you to know, have paid for the entire table of students visiting us from Rowan University so that they get a chance to meet our guest speaker, Monica Malpass. Carter and Pat, I appreciate what you do for the students at our organization. Thank you very much. Last but not least, I must bring up to the podium Dory Lenz. Dory? You're going to clap. It's all right. It's not bad.
Past president.
All right.
This is a report from the Nominations Committee. The officers of the board for 2005-2006. President, we're delighted, Frank Hogan.
Here.
Jerry Wilkinson, Vice President, the man who puts us on the web. Barry Reisman. Barry, raise your hand. Dr. Diego Castellanos, Vice President. Shirley Morris, Secretary, at the entrance. And Pat Delsey, Treasurer. Our board members served for 3 years, and coming up for a 3-year term, David Abramson, Mike Brooks, David Custis, Lydia DeGio, Edward Harvey, Ed Harvey, Sissy Hurst, Marie Pantarelli, and Alan Tripp. And unless there are no objections or any emails sent to me or whatever, we will induct these people in June.
Thank you, Dory. We will also be sending out a new directory sometime within the next 45 days. I hope you've got your corrections in. Thank you much. Enjoy your lunch. After lunch, we'll be meeting Monica Malpass.
17 years ago, 1988, the big news in television and radio was the crash of Flight 103 over Lockerbie. In our own business, 17 years ago, 1988, Jimmy the Greek got fired by CBS because he mentioned that African Americans had been bred in slavery to become bigger and stronger. Jimmy Swaggart, down at his little station in Baton Rouge, confessed on the air that he had had an improper dalliance with a prostitute in Louisiana and was vacating his pulpit. In 1988, Shirley MacLaine went on The Tonight Show and on television called Letterman an asshole. That was the year that was. The good news in 1988 was that Channel 6 went down to Winston-Salem and signed up their weekend anchor. And she came to Philadelphia, and she was a hit. I knew she was going to be a hit because she had pizzazz. Maybe you remember when TV stations and radio stations had enough money to put on big presentation parties each fall for sponsors. We were all sitting in the bus waiting to go down to the art museum where the party was to be held, and I saw Monica Malpass for the first time. She came out in a little red dress with a little fluffy skirt, and it was a short dress, and she was cute as a button. And then she had pizzazz, but I'll tell you what else she had. She was good at her job, she was a pro, she was sharp, she was smart. And she's only gotten better with the years. And I'm really proud to introduce somebody I have deep affection for, but a lot of people do, Monica Malpass.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I am just honored and tickled to be here, literally. I don't know of another place I'd like to be this beautiful Wednesday except in your company. So we'll have some fun. I'm going to tell you a little bit about sort of how I got started and what I've been up to, and I'd love to take some questions and find out what you guys are interested in as well. So we'll have some fun together. I want to start out by talking a little bit about how unlikely of a career this has been. I literally was telling the students at the table, one of them asked me, how'd you get into television? Did you always know what you wanted to do? And the truth of the matter is I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I had worked in retail a couple of summers. I had done some babysitting. I'm from a small town in North Carolina called High Point where they make furniture. I knew I didn't want to make furniture, be near furniture. I wanted to have some pretty furniture. That was about it. But I was from a family of 4 children. I have 3 brothers. My older brother is one of those very brilliant science-minded people who has become an electrical engineer, and in his spare time when he got bored, he got an MBA and 2 other degrees, and he's just amazing. But he was 2 years older than me, got accepted to NC State, which is a wonderful sort of the old farm college in North Carolina that became an engineering school. He got accepted to MIT and Caltech too, and we just couldn't afford it, but he's a smart dude. But anyway, he went to college. I graduated high school, started applying to lots of schools and got in them, which was great, but again, didn't have a focus of sort of narrowing down where to go. So the long and short of it was, I picked the one where I had a partial scholarship because that's what I could afford. I went to UNC Chapel Hill. Turned out to be a very fortuitous decision because 2 years later, after taking the generic couple of years of required classes and a few electives here and there, a little pre-business, pre-med, pre-law, nothing really got me going. It was interesting, mildly, but nothing I wanted to sort of, spend 20 hours a day doing for the next 20 years. So I went to meet a counselor I had never laid eyes on and had never heard of, because that's what you must do when you declare your major. But right before that, the weekend prior, I had driven home 1 hour to High Point, North Carolina, and my brother was there. And again, he was almost finished his first degree, and I'm moaning and groaning about how am I ever going to figure out what I want to do. And as I'm talking about, I could do this, and I've thought about that, and I tried that one class, and that was boring, and this class, and I don't know if I can do the travel component. And he looked at me and said, you talk all the time. Why don't you just go talk for a living, like TV or something? And literally, being a little smarty pants brother, it sparked something, and I went, that's not a bad idea. I do talk all the time. So I went back to UNC having nothing else in my arsenal except, a terrific grade point average and a real hard driving personality type and the ability to talk all the time. And I said to my counselor, do you have anything for people that talk all the time? And she said, we have one of the top 10 journalism schools in the country, terrific radio TV department. Just go check them out. You took one of everything else. What's the harm? So I took a journalism class, fell madly in love with it. It wasn't from the radio TV department, it was the J school, and at that time they were not combined. Then I took a radio television class, sort of the entry-level class, and although many of you have become wonderful engineers and other people behind the scenes, they were teaching us megawatts and kilohertz, and I didn't care how you got it on the air. I wanted to be on the air, so that was boring. So I went back to the J school. What's interesting that I didn't tell the students is at that time, and since then UNC about 8 years ago did combine the two, which was brilliant because, of course, the way the industry's gone. But at that time, there was a real discrimination against anybody in the journalism school that wanted to do television. That was just sort of the, sleazy people who want to make money, and you're not real hardcore journalists, and you're not staying true to the values of the industry and Edward R. Murrow and all that stuff. So anyway, you wouldn't dare breathe a word when you're taking a journalism class that you didn't want to do print media, that you either wanted to do radio or TV. When a few people in that journalism department found out I wanted to do, they went, so I became the red-headed stepkid. There were a number of us who wanted to do TV, but most of them stayed in the TV department, where those weirdos go. They didn't come hang out with the highbrow, smarty pants, J school people. So the net is, I graduated in journalism. I worked on my own secretly at the campus radio station for UNC doing the little rip and read newscast. That was just, volunteerism. You don't get paid for that one. And then by the time I was a junior in UNC, I went to their version of KY Radio, so a paid radio station, and got a paid morning job. How did I know morning would be my life there for a long time? But I was the only kid in school who got up at 4 in the morning, went to work at 4:30, started typing up newscasts, went on the air at 5:30, and went to class at 9, which means I certainly wasn't partying. I wasn't a big partier anyway, but I wasn't going to be because I had to go to sleep at 9:30 to get up at 4. Or get up at 3:30 to be there at 4. So anyway, sort of the die was cast, which was a wonderful thing on many levels, and not that great when I look back. I should have had a little more fun, but anyway, it was fun too. So I got out of UNC armed with a stack full of clippings from where I worked at the Daily Tar Heel, the student paper. I had little audio cards from where I had done their KY radio station as the newswoman. The funny thing is they hated my name, Malpass. They couldn't figure out what that is. The truth is it's really nothing. It's an old English name that means pothole. The way I know that is when I got married, my mom, thinking she was doing the nicest thing, went to the mall in North Carolina, one of those genealogy research places, put both of our last names in, got them all typed out in that real pretty scroll scripted paper and had them framed. And nobody took the time to read the thing, except I did. And it said the people that lived on the Mal, the bad part of the road, the pass, and so we lived around the corner of the pothole. We were like the losers in England. What we tell people is that there's a Castle Malpass. There really is. We didn't own it, certainly. I think we were sort of like the, hired hands that shoveled something in the barn or whatever at Castle Malpass. But anyway, we tell them we're from the Castle Malpass, which is loosely true. Anyway, I got out of UNC Chapel Hill armed with clippings and little audio cards and no TV tape. I did not have an audition tape because I didn't graduate from the radio TV department. And P.S., they were not letting students make tapes back then anyway. Columbia University does, University of Missouri does, lots of them do, Rowan May. There are lots of schools now that have come on board and figured out, you got to come out with your tape. Well, I didn't have a videotape. So I decided, you know what, I graduated a semester early because I was just full charge, steam ahead, raring to go. And I sent resumes to 50 stations in the South, thinking, they're little, I'm from a little place, and they understand little people from little places, and they're going to hire me. Well, I got 50 no's. I kept all 50. What I had not mentioned is one summer I did an internship at our local television station next to my hometown. It was a CBS affiliate, but they informed their interns that although it's a paid internship, you do get college credit as well. They never hire interns. They don't care if you're the next Diane Sawyer, the next Dan Rather. They don't care what your talent potential is. They're never going to hire you, so don't even think about it. I applied anyway. I figured whatever. They say never, never doesn't mean that much. They didn't hire me. But anyway, I took the 50 no letters. I graduated in December, and I decided I'm giving myself 2 months because I have to work. I have to pay off some student loans, and I have to eat and, do little things like buy stuff like shoes and socks. So I moved back home for 2 months, and I said to myself by March 1, so I had the month of January and the month of February to find something in TV. Other than that, I'm going back into retail, which is what I had done to pay for part of my college. So I started calling all 50 stations. And I said to them, I am going to be in your area interviewing. I was practicing interviews with my mother, so I was in the area interviewing. And I know you said no, that you don't have anything right now, but I would like to ask you, for future consideration purposes, if you would have 5 minutes that I could swing by while I'm in the area anyway, and just let me meet you in case something were to come up years from now. Couldn't hurt. 3 of them said, okay. And they were the 3 I could drive my Toyota Starlet about the size of this podium to myself. They were my hometown High Point, the next door town, Greensboro, where I had done that internship. They don't hire people. And Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Anyway, I drove to all 3. High Point, my own hometown. Should have hired me. They went, there. You just go back to your little house and you do retail. Aren't you lovely? So obviously a big no. Greensboro, my own station for 2 summers, paid me. Went, there. You were the cutest little button. No way, no how. You don't have any experience. How do we know you can stand in front of a microphone and talk when all you've done is type on a typewriter at that time, and you've done rip and read radio, nobody saw you? No, I don't think so. Thanks anyway, you little cutie pie you. I went to Winston-Salem on a snowy day in December. It was about 8 inches of snow down south. That's a big deal. Half of the reporter staff didn't show up that day. I made it on time, actually about 15 minutes early. Didn't have anything else to do, They didn't know that. I was interviewing in the area. And I had my suit on with my heels, my little briefcase. I think it was like a $40 briefcase from the version of the Gap back then. Anyway, I showed up armed and ready. And I said, good morning. I know you don't have any openings. I know you don't think I can do television. I've never stood and talked and walked and been photographed at the same time. But I would like to talk with you. And Dave Emery, the news director, this was an NBC affiliate. I believe it was one of 2 crucial breaks for me, and I'll tell you the long-term, what I believe the overlapping, overriding thought is behind this for future purposes of the next generation. He did something very brave, and he said, your resume reflects writing skills and speaking skills on one level, but you really don't have TV experience. I've got a room full of tapes from Missouri, and Columbia University, and every other, university in the country. Why would I hire you? And he said, P.S., local stations don't hire local talent, honey. Has anybody mentioned that to you? They don't want it to look like they just had to go out there and grab the first thing that they could find. They want it to look like they imported some very expensive talent from the Midwest, like Chicago or somewhere cool. So this might be your home market, but nobody on God's green earth is going to hire you here. You've got to go like Dubuque, Des Moines, somewhere with a D. I went, well, I'm here today, and here's my proposal to you. You're right, I don't have a tape. You're right, I don't have any proof that I can do television, not per se. But I'll tell you this, I am so sure I can do it, that if you will send me out with one of the photographers who doesn't have a reporter today to do an audition story, don't put it on the air. Just look at it. How bad can that be? I'll do a story, and if you don't like it, don't hire me. I called his bluff. And he went, who does she think she is? I said it nicely and professionally. He went, okay. And then he proceeded to give me a story which is so appropriate on so many levels. He pulled it out of thin air not knowing my last name's genealogy, and he said, do a story about potholes. Well, I didn't know at that time, because that was 15 years before I got married, that's what my last name meant. But my whole life is one long pothole, as you'll see. And so I did a story knowing nothing about a pothole, not caring much about potholes, except as they would dent my front, alignment on my Toyota. I sat for 10 minutes in a cubicle, and I said, you know what? I'm going to get this job. I don't know. I think I'm going to look under P in the Yellow Pages, pothole, no listing. I'm like, you know what? Let me think about this. I don't know that much about cars. My brothers would know. If I could call my brother, he'd tell me what happens to a car when it hits the pothole. Call the Department of Transportation. Good afternoon. I'm calling from WXII. I'm doing a story about potholes. I'd like someone in your pothole department. The long and the short of it is, 4 hours later, I had a story on his desk. It was awful. It was ugly. It's humiliating. I own it. I'm proud of it. And it got me a job. A photographer went out with me and shot a story. Lots of snowy streets, a couple little potholes, cars going like that. We went to the local body shop. I talked to Joe Blow. He told me it's about $150 to realign your front axle. We got me spinning the thing where they realign the tires. I was all together very nervous. And then we went back, after we did a man on the street, how people hate potholes, put this horrible story together, and he didn't hire me because of that story. He hired me because I didn't give up, because I thought on my feet, because I showed up on a snowy day, because I was so determined and so sure I could do it. And so I believe that if you were to look at my resume tape from that first station, and my keeper tape, they're two very different ones, and I showed you the real tape with the pothole story, you would never hire me. But you didn't know what it took to get that story together, and he saw what I was willing to do in the most professional and appropriate way. I was just not going to take no for an answer. I wouldn't take the no as the letter no, and I wouldn't take the okay 2 minutes and then you're out of here answer, and I wouldn't take the we don't have any stories for you today, make one up. I'll do any story you think of. Every step of the way that there was no, I said, no's not going to work for me today. I was at the 1 month, 28-day point too, just so you know. So it had to happen then or never. So the good news is Dave Emery hired me. The bad news is he always thought of me as the pothole chick. So although he gave me some decent stories here and there, like one a year, I was there 3 years, he never really thought I was going to be much of anything. The weekend anchor, and the other thing I want to tell you is he hired me with a big caveat. I mean, there was a big C next to my name. Caveat, caveat, caveat. He said, this is a part-time job during the weekend afternoon shift, meaning you go in at 3, get off at 11. You're the lowest level of reporter they had. Dog schedule, we call it. It's only going to be 2 days a week. We're never going to hire a local person full-time ever. Remember what I said about the word never? So take this job 2 days a week. If you need to pay your rent, go work at McDonald's. That's what he told me. Dave Emery, go work at McDonald's to supplement your income. And I said, no problem, Mr. Emery. I'll be glad to take those 2 days a week. I don't care what shift I have to work. Yes, sir. I'm just thrilled and tickled pink. I took the job. 2 months later, a reporter quit. It's the natural progression of the business. A lot of turnover, especially in those little markets. I walked into Mr. Emery and said, Mr. Emery, I know that I am local. And I know you said never, ever, ever, ever is a local going to be full-time, but could I please be 5 days a week? And he said, okay. And a year later, the weekend anchor moved to California. I had never anchored on television, ever once, not as a sub, not as in anything. Hadn't practiced, hadn't pretended, hadn't faked it when everybody turned the lights out and went home, nothing. And I said, Mr. Emery, I'd like to apply for your weekend anchor job. He laughed. You got to get used to that. They all laugh. I was over it. He laughed, and I said, well, I would at least like to audition. And he said, okay. And so I did. He went, all right, you can have it. Just don't talk to me again for like a couple of years. So the bottom line is you have to be your own best resource, obviously. You have to be your own best proponent and your best cheerleader nicely and professionally and not be such a nudge, but you can't take no ever for an answer. So I worked 3 years at WXII. Decided I'm ready for bigger markets, couldn't afford an agent. They take 10% of your salary. I didn't have much of a salary, so 10% of nothing, zip. And Toyota needs some new wheels, the whole deal. So I decided I would go figure out a way to apply to big markets without an agent. And the way you do it, when you ask all your friends who are also working in small markets, also making peanuts, also want to grow and be in a larger setting, we all wanted the same things, and many are still my dear friends. And they said, you can use a headhunter, Monica, and the station pays for the headhunter, but it's free to the on-air person. I went, it's what to the on-air person? I love that word. So I sent tapes to headhunters I had never met in Iowa and Texas, and wouldn't you know, one of them does work for Channel 6. Well, here's my funny Channel 6 story real quick, and then we'll move on to other things. My funny Channel 6 story is I came on a vacation for the first time to Philadelphia in the summer of 1987 on my way to go to the U.S. Open in New York, driving from North Carolina because I couldn't afford to fly. So we drove and spent an overnight in Marion, Philadelphia, and on our way up City Avenue off the Schuylkill, which was off of 95, which is off of 85, which is how we got here from North Carolina, I saw these two big TV stations across the street from each other. I thought that was a scream. I was like, oh my God, they are so silly up there in the north. Really, they're just like on the same street. Those big boys play hardball, don't they now? I bet they're right out there in the middle of that street, duking it out. I said, I'm going to apply to both of them. I think that's hilarious. So I sent them tapes. Never heard a word from either one. Just went into the deep fog. Later, I was so crushed. I was stunned. I was like, oh my gosh, who do I think I am applying in the fourth largest market? My tapes were so unworthy, they didn't even deign to appease me with a piece of letterhead saying, get lost, you loser. Go back to the hole you came crawling out of. At least my 50 stations down south were polite, my gosh. So I didn't call, I didn't follow up. I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, these headhunters, 6 months later, my contract's running out from Winston-Salem with Dave Emery, and although he probably would have renewed me, I really was ready to move on. And so I had 1 week left on that contract. Don't you hate these deadlines? It's so nerve-wracking. So I had been sending tapes to headhunters from September till December, planning ahead, 4 months of tapes, and they had not one opening. Not one. I finally did what I did to get the job in Winston-Salem. I had a cousin in Atlanta, Georgia, with her husband and 2 children. I could afford to drive my starlet myself down to Atlanta. If I stayed with my cousin, I could afford that. I'd just be paying for food along the way. So I called all 3 Atlanta stations and did the I'm in your area interviewing routine. No. I did get 4 interviews, including CNN. Nobody was hiring because they already had a Monica in the market. I said, I'll change my name. I don't mind. I'm very flexible. They said, we don't need you anyway. We don't really know what we want. That's not you. I went, oh. That sounded pretty definitive. I had sent tapes myself, separate from the headhunter, to San Diego, every mid-level to upper level I could think of. I didn't deign to go back to Philadelphia since they blew me off so badly. Anyway, lo and behold, out of the blue, I got a call from Frank Maggot Associates, one of these free headhunter type places. I had been sending my tapes to them with not much of a response. They had just thrown me on some generic reel for, 26-year-old brunette chicks, whatever. And I didn't know it. There was an opening in Philadelphia. And so I got a call. And they said, we've set up an interview. I went, you set up an interview? How lovely. No one had said those words to me before because I set my own up, obviously. So to hear that coming from a headhunter, I was like, whoa, that's cool. We'll fly you up. You're flying me up? The whole thing was bizarre and surreal. They flew me up for an interview / audition. I had 3 interviews that day. And as each one kept going, I was like, they don't hate me like I thought they did when they didn't return my letter. So it must be going okay. Then we went to lunch. It's that round building on the Ben Franklin Parkway that's now a hotel. It's right across from the Four Seasons. I forget what it was 17 years ago, but it had a lovely restaurant in it. What was it?
Plaza.
It was the Plaza? Okay. Anyway, the news director and the assistant news director, Ned Warwick and Ed Schimmel, took me to lunch, and I thought, this is a good sign. They don't hate me that much. Things are going well. I ordered duck. I thought it was off the bone. I'm sitting at a small table for 3, splashing purple duck juice on both bosses, violently. I spent most of the lunch going, oh, I am so sorry. Let me get that for you. I didn't eat a bite of the duck. I was trying to carve the devil. I was just like, oh my God. We got back to the station. As a technicality, they handed me a piece of paper, an application, said, here, on your way back, fill that out. You know, we have most of your information, but we just want to formalize it. In my rush not to mess up, I left the application on the desk. I got back to North Carolina thinking, ugh, this is so pathetic. I am really not ready for the fourth largest market. Clearly, they knew it in September. I didn't have the heart to say, did you get both my tapes, not just the maggot, but the one they don't know still. They've got 2 of my tapes in there. So anyway, I guess whatever happened that day, the audition must have gone well. Despite the duck juice and despite never having filed an application for the job, which I still haven't, they called and said, we'd like to offer you the job. I was thrilled. I had about an hour left on my contract at XII. I said, oh, really? This is where you've got to work it, ladies and gentlemen, work it a little bit. I said, oh, really? Tell me sort of the details. And they said, well, we'd like to offer you 2 peanuts instead of the one you're making. I went, oh, gentlemen. Big market, I don't think 2 peanuts are going to do it. I'm expecting at least 4 peanuts. I know what you people make in Philadelphia. They laughed. Remember the laughter? They laughed. They laughed. They went, oh, she is so silly, that one. They said, well, if you don't want the job at 2 peanuts, we'll give it to the 4,000 people that have tapes in our office. And I said, I'll get back to you tomorrow. I have to check my other offers. Not being a jerk, but you gotta work it, you know. You gotta work it. It's a business. You're not running a charity here. I called them the next day and said, I have spoken with the other stations and decided Philadelphia would be my best option despite the 2 peanut problem. And so I would be happy to join you. And they said, well, we actually have 2 openings. One is a reporter, full-time, and one is a half-anchored, the morning thing, which was just these little cut-ins wrapped around the network. It wasn't a show. And then the other half of your day, you're a reporter. And I said, I don't think I'm a jerk, but I just like to think I'm assertive. I said, I won't come if you don't give me the anchor job. Now, I had about 5 minutes left on my last job. No promise of anything from Dave Emery. He had lots of people wanting that weekend anchor slot. They said, all right. Came here as an anchor. Rick Williams took the reporter position. So technically, although Ricky is my blood brother, and I adore him, I'm a little more senior than him. Not much. The truth is, he and I started about 2 months apart, and he started 2 months after I did, but nonetheless, I was anchor, which anymore doesn't matter because we're both anchors. But the joke I always tease him is, you got the job I didn't want. Doesn't make him feel bad, no. Anyway, so I came here as an anchor, and it's been a wonderful run. They combined those 2 cut-ins to be a half hour. They added a weatherman. Mornings became hot nationwide. Obviously, it became a day part making lots of money, so then they doubled the airtime to be an hour and then 2 hours. I had been here 3 years and never worked a full contract because they kept changing it because I wasn't, finishing out deals. They were growing the show. So I have been a very lucky girl, and I am honored and thrilled to say that. But I also believe you make your own luck in some ways, as you all know from the business. Now, the other little quick things I wanted to add and tell you about was my 2 favorite stories. People always ask me. I've been very lucky. The station that I'm at is so kind to let people grow in ways that maybe even they didn't imagine. So over time, I had a love of politics always. I was able to go back to school and get a master's while I was working full-time in politics, political science at Villanova. I was allowed to substitute on, hosting debates and doing Inside Story and other things for other people, and they allowed me to go on international travel. My 2 favorite stories, internationally at least, are the JFK plane crash. I got to cover that for a week. That was horrific but riveting television and so, on the edge of news-breaking events. And then the Diana funeral was heartbreaking on so many levels and curious and mysterious. So those have been my 2 favorites. But it's been a wonderful run, and the great news is there are so many wonderful stories out there to be covered, and I'm at my favorite station ever to do it. Now, I will take your questions. Anybody have? Yes.
Well, I want to go meet.
Oh, my goodness, thanks.
I watch you on TV, but I never thought you had a background like you do. You are a fast, good talker.
Thank you.
What do you think about accent on positive news instead of all negative news? We accent more positive news and make it interesting, make it upbeat. Don't you think some of that should get into the news once in a while instead of all of this dreadful
Right.
negative news?
Unfortunately, the truth is viewership, despite what most people will tell you if you ask them, oh yes, we hate all those murders and fires, ugh, I will never watch local news. What they really are not saying is they watch it because of that. And if it were just all good news about the economy's growing and communities are thriving and Girl Scout cookie sales are up, and I'm not being trite because I too am horrified by the level and the amount of violence on the newscast, but we are a business. We do have to sell our newscast, which is to say we need eyeballs out there so our advertisers will advertise. So as both a public service, telling people the dangerous areas, and as a need to know because we think it should be told, we try to have a nice mixture. There are many crimes we never report, to be honest with you. Working on that morning shift, for 17 years I got up at 3 a.m. and did that morning shift in Philly. Gave up my college fun, and whew, honey, gave up a lot of nights in Philly because I was asleep at 8 o'clock, either in my soup or at my house. I'd go to dinner with my friend, be nodding off like this. I could never finish a 7 p.m. movie in Narberth movie theater, not one. Anyway, so if you know the endings to about 15 good movies, I still don't know what happened on some of them. But the bottom line is we try to do both. And my little boy is 5 years old. I won't let him watch the news. Ever. Not my news, not anybody's news, not CNN, nobody. I don't want him to see that either. So I do understand, and I feel your pain. Sadly, there is a lot of it in our culture, and we have to be sort of fair in showing all aspects of life. But what I was going to say on the morning show, I would come in at 4 in the morning, and we'd have the crime blotter from the night before. There would be 20 murders. We'd only report 3 of them, if that makes you feel better. It's not much solace, but nonetheless, if it didn't have some unusual component, if it was just another garden variety drug shootout, a couple of guys or whatever, we didn't even report many of them because there were just too many. So we would pick the ones, sadly, that had a, innocent bystander shot, or, several on one street in one night, or something that made it different than just one dude getting picked off on a corner. It sounds very callous, but there's so much of it that we try to be selective, we try to be fair, we try to do the ones that really might impact people and their safety or a need-to-know basis, but it's a very difficult balance. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Do you have any reporters assigned to go out and find worthwhile news that is not murders and fires?
Absolutely. We have a whole department, an investigative department. I would say every one of our reporters is good at engineering stories. I was on the phone last week engineering one myself. We all do that all day. Then you gather the facts and you still have to walk into either your assistant news director or your news director and sell the idea and make it sound interesting. So, the hard part is not just finding the story, but then selling it to your own people. And they are trying to put together the most exciting newscast too, as well as the most informative, and balance all those things.
The policy is to take the easy route and put the fires and murders on for the first 5 minutes.
No, not the easy route. What I'd like to say is that we try to vary it. In fact, if you'll watch carefully, if you sit down with a little notebook, which I've done before, and actually log, I don't have to do it because I have the rundowns, but log the other stations too and see what we're all leading with. We don't lead with, fires and murders every day. And as I said, there are zillions in a market this size, a greater 4 million people in this area. I mean, that's a lot of house fires. Can you imagine if we told you about every one? So I'm not trying to defend us completely because I agree with you. It's still too many. But we do enterprise a lot of stories, and every night we build in health, consumer, school news, all kinds of things that I do feel good about. And I don't feel bad about the crime, but I don't want so much of it. As I said, I won't let my son watch. Yes, sir. Last question. Okay?
I think we better get you out of here.
Okay, no problem. I'll just... Last one.
You're vivacious.
Thanks.
Well, I want to know, do you have your 4 peanuts now?
Do I have my 4 peanuts? About 4, yeah. I have about 4. Now I want 5 with inflation. No, I must tell you, as a young person in this business, I didn't have one family member in the business. I didn't know, I'm telling you on God's green earth, I did not know one soul. When I worked in radio at Chapel Hill, those were local people who didn't know one person on a network radio level. I didn't know anybody on a national level from my little daily Tar Heel experience. I mean, I tried, networking, but networked to where? Chapel Hill. And that's a lovely town, but I knew I didn't want to stay. So I really feel so fortunate that things have worked out for me, and they don't for many people. I was telling some of the students at the table, a lot of my friends from that first market, we all scattered. They went to Tampa, some went to California, here, there, and everywhere, and they mostly have done a hopscotch around the nation, as many of you have done, to 7 markets. I've been lucky to work at 2, so luck is a definite component. And you just have to do your very best and cross your fingers and try your hardest. I mean, and you'll get lucky sometimes, and then sometimes you won't. I haven't been 100% lucky, but 98's good enough.
Monica Malpass, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
With our watch.
Presents, and they're free.
Here you go, our watch and our pin, and we thank Monica, and thank you all. All right.
you.
My pleasure. Monica Malpass from Channel 6. Larry Mendy is going to be our guest on the June meeting. We'd love to have you all attend. That's the final meeting of the year. Thank you all for coming, and thanks for being with us this afternoon.